Okay, welcome to Chapter 3. Hopefully, you guys had some fun camera tracking in Chapter 2 and understand all of the concepts there because we're going to be building upon them in this chapter with some planar tracking. And so, you want to make sure you go download the chapter footage as we're going to be working with many different video files today for this specific chapter about planar tracking. And so, let's go ahead and jump straight into it. Now, inside Blender, what we want to do is we want to go through the exact same kind of camera tracking process. However, instead of actually creating 3D data, today we're going to be creating basically 2D data that we can use in compositing to achieve some really cool results. So let's come into VFX and back to motion tracking, your favorite kind of workspace to work in. Let's go ahead and open up the first footage. So 3-1, we want to open up that movie clip. Don't worry about actually converting it into an image sequence since it should work fine for our purposes. So as you can see, we have this result. Let's go ahead and, like always, go to frame 1. We're going to set the scene frames, prefetch our footage, and come over and change our color management to standard. So now with planar tracking, it's basically the same process. We want to add basically 4 tracking points to the corner of whatever we're tracking, and then that's going to basically give us a plane track that we can use to deform some things in the compositing section. So what I want to go ahead and do is let's set match to previous frame, normalize, and make the correlation 0.9. So same thing as we always do. So for this first shot, basically, what you're going to be doing a lot of times if you do any visual effects, in studios or anything like that, is you're going to be handed a ton of screen replacement visual effects. So this is a thing that, every visual effects artist will eventually come across. And so this is a great kind of segue into planar tracking. So what we want to do is let's go ahead and control click one of the corners, Alt S to reveal search area, come to the track section up here. And this is perfectly fine for our scene. We don't need to mess around with any of the pattern size or search size. Let's go ahead and control click all of the 4 corners. And we do want to try to be as accurate as possible for these in case we, again, ever do have to manually set them through everything. Let's go ahead, Control T, track this forward. You can see for this specific clip, all of them made it to the end. So now this is all we need for the planar track. We only need 4 markers instead of the 8 like we do for camera tracking because we're actually not going to be dealing with any solve number or any floor or anything like that. So let's come to the Solve tab. Instead of solving in all of this, we can have this plane track button up here. So let's go ahead and create plane track. And what this allows us to do is now we actually have this rectangle. And so this rectangle is basically going to be where the screen of wherever we want to put the screen is going to be. And so, of course, I do want to place that as accurately as possible. So let's place that there. I believe like right here is the edge of that screen because it's a little bit inset from the actual corners. And so I'm trying to mimic that as much as possible. And then like right here, I believe is the other screen. I might move this one down a little bit. So right there is, roughly where the screen is. You can play around and try to get a perfect kind of, rectangle like that. Let's go ahead and now play our footage. And now you can see it is doing a great job of kind of tracking to our actual thing. And so, of course, we do want to kind of make this as accurate as possible. So I'm going to try to play around with these. It's kind of hard to see kind of the edges. And so I'm just kind of eyeballing it how it is in reference to the bottom. And so that's roughly, pretty good. We can always change it a little bit later. So now that we actually have our planar track, we'll notice in the layout tab, we have nothing changed. And again, this is because we're not actually doing any 3D stuff in today, this chapter. It's all compositing. So that's the big thing I kind of want you guys to take away from this. So let's come up to the compositing tab. Down to use nodes. Again, we're not doing any 3D, so we don't need the render layers. Let's go ahead and import in everything. So I'm going to do a movie clip node this time since we didn't convert it to an image file. And then let's just locate wherever we have that saved. So 3-1. And then we can go ahead and we want to decide whatever we want to put on the actual, TV or anything. So let's go ahead and Shift A. I'm going to add a image node and then just locate whatever image that you want. I've provided the image I use, but of course it could be an image, it could be a video file, whatever you want to put on the screen is, what you have to load in here. Okay, so let's go ahead and click that in. And then now that we have these two things, let's go ahead and I'm going to Shift A and add a alpha over node like we always do. Let's add that in here. We want the screen on the bottom and then the image on the top. And let's view that again, that is Shift, Control, and click. So now you can see that we basically just have a super simple alpha over and our screen is on top of everything. So what we want to do is let's go ahead, Shift A, we can add a plane track deform node. And so if we add that in here, let's open up the footage. So 3-1 is the footage that we tracked to. We can add a camera and then our plane track. Of course, if you do want to rename it, I didn't show you that, but all you would do is come over here in the plane track settings of the track window. We can make a new name for it. So in that case, if you want many planar tracks for the same footage, that's how you kind of differentiate the two. So now that we have that, we can come back to the compositing tab, and now you can see that our footage is actually being projected onto the screen, and so that looks pretty good. Of course, one thing I do want to call attention to, if we go back to the motion tracking tab, we have all of these very nice reflection data and all the stuff that we can use to get a very accurate result. Because if you see, if I come to this frame, we can see there's like a window or something there that's producing a lot of light and giving us a lot of reflection, and we want to try to keep that intact as much as possible. And so in order to do that, we're actually doing it the wrong way now, and so we're basically combining it how we would always do it with an alpha over. In order to actually get the reflections back, what we can do is, instead of doing an alpha over, let's go and delete that. We want to shift A, we want to add a mix color node. And so let's place that here. We can think of it as the same exact thing as an alpha over node. So let's place that on the bottom and then this one on the top. And now you can see it's doing this result with basically just mixing the two things together, but this time it doesn't have an alpha channel. So what we can tell it to do instead of mix, which is kind of the default value, we can do a screen, this screen node right here. And you can see that done exactly what we want it to. If we go to that frame that I had before where we actually have some reflections, now you can see that it's actually bringing some of those reflections on top of the footage, and everything is looking much more accurate there. And so you can play around with this. What I actually might do is go ahead and make it full screen. So let's go back to the motion tracking tab, and let's bring this to just the entire black section. Depending on how you actually want to play it, you can have a little bit of a border depending on the screen. If not, I just wanted to showcase that because A, we can move this thing after the fact and it'll automatically update, but B, we actually don't need the kind of window right here to be right on top of our markers. We can actually have the markers just define the plane, and then this kind of rectangle just, be, wherever we want our screen in. As long as they're on the same plane, it doesn't matter. So that is looking much better. Let's go back to the compositing tab, and as you can see, let's give it a little bit, and now you can see it's automatically updated to the thing. What we will notice is that there's a ton of motion blur. I'm actually moving around the scene, and so of course we do want to match that as much as possible. So let's click motion blur right there, and it's doing its best job to kind of mimic that as much as possible. Of course, depending on your camera, you might need to affect the shutter speed and stuff like that, and so you can set those numbers. What I also might do is try to match the blur of the actual scene, and so let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go ahead and we'll blur it after the fact. So I'm going to add a blur node after our plane deform. And then let's just do a fast Gaussian, and I might blur it like 3 pixels. So 3 right there. Now you can see it's much more blurred and much more matching the original footage. And so that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and get this rendered out. So plug that into Composite. Let's come up here. I'm going to be rendering as a movie clip node just because it's going to be so fast to render. So FFmpeg video, of course, if you want MOV, it's QuickTime. MPEG 4 is MP4 file, and then I'm going to set it to high quality there. And so now with that, let's go ahead and save our project. And then after you saved your project, let's come and render the animation. Okay, so here's the result that we got. It tracks pretty well. There are a few like little hitches and stuff there that I would probably spend a little bit more time and get out. But for the sake of our tutorial, this is totally fine for our needs. You can see that it looks much more realistic, and we're actually getting some of the reflections and all that stuff in. And so again, that's kind of the most simple kind of visual effects shot that you can do. And it's the reason that every kind of beginner artist gets thrown a ton of screen replacements and stuff like that. So even this screen replacement would be considered a pretty tough screen replacement, considering everything else that you usually do. So now that we have that kind of workflow defined, and you have a little bit more understanding of how planar tracking works, let's go and move on to another aspect of planar tracking that could be useful for your own needs. So within a new project inside of Blender, let's go ahead and go to Plus, VFX, Motion Tracking, and let's open up 3-2. So here's 3-2. I'm going to go ahead and open that up. Of course, let's set scene frames, prefetch, and set it back to standard. So now that we have this, basically what we have is a sign where I want to place some decals on it. And so decals, you can think of it basically as just images that has some transparency. And so it can be like blood, it can be, spray paint, it can literally be anything, bullet holes, stuff like that. And so anything that you kind of want to put on a 2D surface and have it track to the footage. You could motion track and camera track the footage and get it all like that. However, planar tracking is much, much more precise if you purely just need to place a planar thing such as decals on it. So let's talk about the process to do that. So first of all, we need to track everything again. So previous frame, normalize, correlation to a 0.9. I believe all the settings up here are fine, so let's just go ahead and define. Now in this one, I want to showcase that you don't actually need to do the corners. You just need to do 4 points on the actual thing that are spread apart enough for it to actually get a planar track. So what I'm going to do is on frame 1, let's just control click. I'm going to click some of these corners of these letters and use some of those to actually camera track. Instead of the corners. So let's just go select those. I want to Control T, track those forward. You can see they reach the end of the clip. We actually seem like we might be having one down here that goes a little wonky. So let's actually double check that. So I'm going to select this one right here. And so that one is this at the top. So let's just double check, make sure it is, still being tracked. It actually looks fine to me. So I don't understand why this red thing is giving me a spike or anything. So it might just be a little bit wonkiness with the graph, but visually it looks okay. So I'm just going to keep it. So now with all of that kind of camera tracked, of course, what we can do is hit A, select everything, go to solve, and create a new planar track. Of course, let's name it this time. So I'm going to name this sign in case we ever do want to make another planar track. So now we have the plane track, and you can see it's projecting to that. Of course, we can now set the boundaries of where we actually want it to track onto. So of course, I do want to make this sign a little bit bloody, or add some decals and stuff to it. So let's go ahead and just set the bounds kind of to the edges of this, like so. So like right there. And of course, I always like to kind of verify that it looks good. And yeah, so that looks good. It looks like it's tracking all the way through our footage. So now let's come up to the compositing tab. Of course, let's hit use nodes and delete our render layers nodes. And we do need to import everything in. So let's do a movie clip and then open up our footage. Here it is, 3-2. So open that clip, and then let's go ahead and add in a image. And so this image, I've provided a couple of decals for you to use. Of course, you could go on Google Images, and just anything with a transparent background you can put on the object. And so let's go ahead and open up. I'm going to open up my blood image. So of course, I've provided that for you guys if you want to follow along. Okay, so here is my blood pass. I'm just going to open up that image and open image. And now what we can do, of course, is we're going to alpha over this time because we don't really care about reflections. So we can add that here. I can add the footage on top and then the blood on the bottom. Control Shift click that. And now we have this effect. And so, of course, what we want to do again is add a plane track to form. Let's go ahead and open up our footage, our camera, and then our sign that we created. And so already that's doing a pretty good job of actually projecting that on, and, just another way that we can, do stuff to add to a 3D world. Say if I get a client who wants to make a zombie apocalypse movie, but they're like, hey, we need to add blood to this sign, and we totally forgot to do it on the day. And so if you could, planar track that and add blood to it, this is kind of the process and kind of a real world example that would happen inside of visual effects. So of course, this blood is way too red, so let's go ahead and try to color correct this as much as possible. So I'm going to add a color balance node. Let's go ahead. I'm going to decrease the gamma a little bit. Maybe the lift, and then the gain. We'll just decrease everything, and we'll increase the gain a little bit. So now it's a little bit of a darker kind of red color. It just matches a little bit, better to the actual scene. And so that is pretty much the result. Let's go ahead and motion blur it, just to match the motion blur of the scene. And that's pretty much it. We added a decal to this sign. So now let's go a step further into the real world example. All the time inside of visual effects, people will ask you to render out a mask. And so what a mask is basically anytime you do visual effects, you have alpha channels. And so say if you send this thing off to color, they're going to want a mask of the blood, for example, to if they need to color correct it for any reason. It's very common inside of visual effects for color to ask for a mask for the visual effects. And so in order to do that, we have two kind of options that we can do. So right here we have this plane section. If they are just asking for the mask of, this planar track that we did, this is all they need. All masks are basically black and white passes that you can use for alpha channels. Now they might request that you already do it as an alpha channel, and that's totally fine. If not, we can actually render this out as a movie clip. And so then I could plug this into the composite section and then go ahead and render this out. And basically it's just going to be a black and white kind of movie pass that they can use to then convert into alpha and all that stuff. And so that's how you do the mask of the actual planar track. Now to get the actual mask of the alpha, what we could end up doing is let's go ahead and get this alpha channel. You can see this is the exact same thing, a black and white basically mask of everything. And we can do the exact same process. So we can go ahead and I'm going to Shift D, duplicate this down, go plug the alpha into the image this time. And then now if we go into the image here, it'll basically do the exact same kind of alpha that we have up here. You can see they, if I do the exact same thing, we can see that they're basically overlaid with each other. And the nice thing is that if we actually plug this image into the image of the composite node this time and then render it out as a movie file, it's going to fill in all of this extra area over here as black as well. And so then we would get a black and white mask as well to send off to color or anything like that. So let's put this into practice. Let's do some cool stuff with compositing. And so those are just kind of to show you how to render out those masks if you ever need it. Okay, so now let's apply that inside of Blender. So say if I want to do and use the mask inside Blender for some unique compositing, we can go ahead, Shift A, let's add a hue saturation value node. And then if we play around with the hue, you can see that basically it's just shifting the hue of everything in our specific scene. This is just a super basic kind of example of what we can do with the mask from the plane track to form node. So now with that, what we can use is this plane factor. If you remember before when we had viewed that, basically it's just a black and white mask. And so we can use that to only affect this node. Of course, it's doing the opposite of what we want right now. We basically want everything besides the sign to be kind of affected. And so of course, let's just add a quick invert color node and plug that in there. And now we can see that basically it's just inverting everything. And so that's black to white and white to black, which is giving us this result. And so I think this is a pretty cool result. Of course, this isn't totally accurate as there are some, discoloration of the buildings and fire hydrant and stuff back here. I wish there was a great way to do green screen keying, because what we could do is get the key of the green in Blender and then combine it with this mask and everything. However, the chroma keying in Blender is one of the worst things I have ever seen. For some reason, I don't know why the chroma keying isn't that great inside of Blender. I wish it was, because then I would be doing a lot more green screen stuff in this course. However, if you are interested in playing around with it, it's the keying node. And so there is a specific way that we can get the keying node and combine it with our planar track node to actually get a matte to only affect the green grass. However, again, the keying node is awful inside of Blender. They really need to fix that. So now we have this result. This is the final result that we're going to get for this part of the tutorial. Let's go ahead and plug the hue into here, and let's go ahead and get a render. So let's come out, File, Output Node, set wherever you want it to be rendered. Of course, let's FFmpeg video again. I'm going to save it MP4 and then high quality. So now that we have that, let's go ahead and render the animation there. Okay, so here is that result. You can see that we basically have put blood on the actual sign here and then changed some of the color with the mask that the planar track actually gave us. So this is just a kind of nice way to, get masks, but also place decals and stuff onto CGI, or sorry, real world objects and stuff like that. Of course, if you were actually going to rotoscope out the sign and everything, this would be a much more involved process for rotoscoping. And that's why planar tracking is so good for this specific use case for actually using masks and stuff like that. Okay, so let's do one final planar track, and I really think you guys are going to like this. It opens up a lot of cool opportunities inside of Blender specifically. So let's X out of here, and of course, let's open up a new project. We're going to be using 3-3 this time. So VFX, motion tracking, open up 3-3. So here it is. We can open up that clip. Of course, set scene frames and prefetch everything. And then I'm going to go ahead and color management to standard. So now you can see we have this stop sign right here. And basically, I want to change this stop sign to be green, but also to showcase the word go on it. And so this is going to be super fun, and it'll apply to a lot of stuff that you can do with visual effects and planar tracking inside of Blender. So let's go ahead and do our, tried and true method. What we want to do is match previous frame, normalize. Let's do the correlation to point line. And then what I want to do is control click. We can click inside of here. Again, all of these settings are accurate for my specific scene. And then just control T, track those to the end. And all of them made it, so that is very good. Let's come to solve plane track, create plane track this time. And then we can come and name our plane track. I'll name this stop sign. So that is very good. Now, what we've been doing is we've been getting this track, and then we've been setting it to the actual, screen or whatever we want to place it on. Everything as of now has been rectangular. How do we actually do stuff to, kind of shapes like this? And so this is a really fun part where we can actually replace stuff and get really advanced. It's also great for cleanup work and clean plating and stuff like that. And so it gets real advanced and into all that the higher and higher you want to actually do for this visual effect shot. Now what I want to do, of course, is to place something on the stop sign and basically replace a stop sign. It's going to be very hard to do how we have it now, because basically the stop sign, we're going to be viewing it from, basically 180 degrees around it. And so how do we actually replace that stop sign without having to do any 3D work? So of course, let's do everything that we've been doing so far. Let's come back up to compositing, delete the render layers. We can go ahead and add in our movie clip, which is going to be our 3-3 footage, if you remember. So let's go ahead and import that in. And then I want to go ahead and add in a image node. And so if you have in, the folder section, you have a image I created. So you want to go ahead and open that up. So here is the image. It's basically just a clean plate that I created inside of Photoshop, where I erased the stop kind of lettering and then put go in it, and then made sure it was, correctly aligned and everything. And so here is that. Let's control shift click that. And you can see this is basically the image I did. So what I did is I rendered out the very first frame of our footage. If I go back and forth between this, you can see it's the exact same frame. So I rendered that out as a PNG file, took that into Photoshop, and then, added this on it. And so what that is going to allow us to do is now we can project this first frame onto the actual footage, and it's basically going to, replace this sign. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's, of course, hit an alpha overnode, place this on the bottom, and then the original footage on the top. And now if I go ahead and add a plane track deform node, we can go ahead and open up our clip, our camera, and then also our stop sign that we made. And as you can see, this is exactly what is happening right now. Whatever we set as our kind of, box right here, that's what it's going to be projected to. And so that is, kind of the way that we like to work in, usually inside of Blender. The great thing is that we don't have to define that on a specific thing. If we actually set it to the full frame, what it's going to do is it's going to basically track the entire full frame image on the planar track. And then we can use a mask to actually, specify that we just want to replace the stuff around here. And so let's go ahead and get into it. So first of all, I'm going to go into motion tracking. And like I said, we want this box right here to be to take up the entire frame of my kind of thing. Now, there's really no easy way to do that. Unfortunately, I don't know if there's any kind of key button shortcut and stuff. In a lot of other compositing programs, there's actually a kind of one-click button to set this box to the full frame, since this is kind of a usual thing. A way we can get around that is, again, I am on frame 1. You do want to be on the frame that you do want to start on, and so that's very important. But on frame 1, I'm going to position this box basically near the corners. And then once we have pretty much everything in the corners right here, I'm going to go ahead and zoom in real close, and I want to try to get as accurate to the pixel as possible. So let's put it like right there. And then again, we're just going to come to all the corners and really zoom in and make sure we're getting as accurate as possible. So right on the corner there, and then right on the corner here. And so I'm just going to keep on doing that. Again, you do want to try to be as accurate as possible, because the more accurate you are, the more our stop sign is going to actually stick. And so finally, we can position that right there. So that looks good. That looks perfectly aligned. And again, we are on the first frame, or whatever frame that we actually, rendered out and did the clean plate for. Okay, so now that we have the whole rectangle kind of out here, here is what it's doing. So if we go throughout the footage, you can still see it's using our planar track, and now it's basically being planar tracked throughout the entire thing. And so now you can see, if you kind of imagine in the real world, if there is this huge billboard here, this is how it would basically be rotated in the scene. And so that's just kind of a really cool thing to watch and see. Again, only 4 points of data and no 3D. This is all kind of 2D cheats and hacks and stuff like that. And so now that we have this defined, let's go back to the compositing tab. And now if we let this kind of load for a little bit and kind of view this back and forth, now we basically have this combined in a way to where it's going to be rotating exactly how we just saw it. And so now you can see this entire frame right here is basically like this. The very important thing is that now our stop sign is perfectly on that thing. And so if I kind of go back and forth between them, you can see our stop sign is here, and then our go stop sign is there. And so it aligns perfectly, and should be able to, composite that out. Of course, how do we actually, mask out the stop signs so we can get rid of some of this ugly stuff over here? It's super easy, and that's actually to do with masking inside Blender. So, of course, in compositing and visual effects, we're going to be creating our own custom mask all the time. And so let's go ahead and talk about how to do that. So first of all, I'm going to come into the motion tracking tab. Now the motion tracking tab also doubles as a masking workspace. All we have to do is come up here and go, instead of tracking, we want to go to mask. And so basically, the masking workspace is going to be, the same kind of tool set as the tracking. So if we actually come down here, I am on the very first frame. Again, we want to do everything on the frame that we created the clean plate for. It'll, make sense in a little bit as we start combining everything back together. So of course, I want to control click to add a mask. That is not doing anything. We actually have to add a mask up here. So I'm just going to add a mask stop sign. You can, of course, name it whatever that you want up here. So mask stop sign right there. Let's now we can control click and add mask. So I'm just going to go around the perimeter of this. What's actually pretty cool, we won't be doing it for this specific shot, but what we could do is track a specific point and then parent that point to a mask. So we can do some, cool compositing tricks with that as well. So now that we have all that selected, if we come back into the compositing tab, we can go ahead and add that mask in. So let's add a mask node. Let's open up that mask stop sign that we created. And if we view that, it's, of course, the black and white thing that we were talking about before. And so that is, pretty cool and, just a black and white thing. Of course, the first frame means it's going to align to that. And so that is looking good. And we can tell that is exactly where it's going to go. And so we can do two things. What we could do is we can go ahead and add a set alpha node and place that before our plane track deform node up here. And if I plug the mask into the alpha up here, what that is basically going to do is it's going to apply that mask that we just created to our clean plate image. And since we're doing that before our plane track image, what that is actually going to do is it's going to track it throughout the footage now with the mask already applied. And so basically that has done exactly what we wanted to, and it has tracked it through our entire footage. And now you can see the stop sign says go, and so that's very cool and a super fast way to work there. What you could also do if you did need to do any special compositing stuff, say if we wanted to do a set alpha after the plane track deform, since sometimes you might want to do that for any particular reason. All we will do there is Shift D. We would duplicate this plane track deform down, and since they're the exact same kind of data and stuff like that, and since we did it both on frame one, basically it's just going to apply that same thing, and then now we're doing the set alpha after, and so it'll automatically kind of update the mask as well. And so now you can see that it's basically deforming the mask as well to our stop sign. And so that's just another kind of way to do it if you want to do that instead. I know sometimes you do need to have the set alpha after for a particular compositing. I'm actually going to redo everything, so we are doing the set alpha before the plane track just because it's a little bit nicer of a node setup. So again, we're just plugging the image into the set alpha and then our mask into the alpha of that set alpha. So now we have this result, which is really cool and is giving us exactly the result that we are looking for. Of course, I do want to play around with the actual hue to make this a green sign, just because green is go and red is stop. I don't make the rules there. So let's just go ahead and apply that. So super easy way to do that is let's just go ahead and we'll add a hue saturation value node like we did in the other one, and we're going to plug that before we do anything. And so this image is basically going to be color corrected before we actually planar track it and stuff like that. So let's go ahead and play around with the hue to make it a little bit more green. So of course I want to view that. So that's a little bit more green. We can make it a little bit darker like that. So that is looking good. And you know, don't worry about all this other stuff, because again, we have that mask that is going to get that out. So this is what we're going to be doing. And then we're basically going to be planar tracking that onto this footage and replacing the sign. And so now this is the result that we have. We basically have the sign saying go now. And so that's very good. I found for this one, I didn't really need motion blur on this. And so I'm just going to leave it like that. What we could do is many times for masking and for visual effects, you will see kind of like a little bit of a seam right here. What I'm actually going to go ahead and do is blur the mask a little bit and kind of feather the edges. And so what we can do, we have this feather thing right here. What I'm actually going to do is just Shift A, we can add a blur node to it. If we're just blurring the mask, it shouldn't affect everything else. So let's go ahead and Fast Gaussian. We can blur this like 5 pixels like that. So now you can see the edges are a little bit more blurred. And now if we're applying that alpha, you can now see, you know, a little bit right here that we're feathering the edge a little bit. And so it's helping, you know, composite those in together and not having kind of an edge right there. And so that is pretty much it for this shot. You can get more advanced into some of the things with this, but this is kind of as, you know, high level as you need to know, because if you know, do the things that we did for the planar tracking and actually set the boundary to be the full screen, you can basically do a lot of stuff with planar tracking, such as like erasing stuff. You know, if you have a moving camera and you have a wall that has like a poster on it, you can basically render out a frame and remove that poster in Photoshop and then camera track it, planar track it instead, and remove that. And so it's a really, really cool feature set and, you know, really cool workflow inside of Blender. So let's plug an image in Composite. Let's get this rendered out. So output properties, put a, you know, output folder, FFmpeg video, encoding, we're going to say MP4, and then high quality. Of course, we've been doing this for a while now, so it should come naturally. So hopefully you guys are getting more used to that process there. So now finally that we have that, we do have everything plugged in the composite node, which is very important. Let's go ahead and render the final animation. Okay, so here is the result that we got from this final kind of composite that we did. We can see that everything is looking good and it matches perfectly. I'm super excited about this because this opens up a realm of possibilities inside of visual effects, and it's super easy to do inside of Blender. Hopefully you guys understand that process and what it takes to, you know, apply this to other shots, such as, you know, removing a billboard or, you know, making a billboard blank or stuff like that. It really opens up a lot of stuff you can do. Hopefully you guys enjoyed Chapter 3. I know is a little less exciting than camera tracking, as camera tracking is probably the coolest thing ever. But I'm super excited because now throughout all of these 3 chapters, we are building up to this 4th and final chapter where we're going to be making this amazing shot. So can't wait to get started inside of that, and I will see you there.